time.
Here's what our attorneys make us say. We believe all the information we offer on this program is factual and up to date. However, we cannot guarantee its accuracy, and you should not think of it as a complete analysis of the subjects discussed. We are also not giving you an offer to buy or sell the investments we talk about. All investments involve varying degrees of risk, and we cannot guarantee any specific investment or strategy will be suitable or profitable for your portfolio. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action.
You've worked hard and saved for retirement, but remember, it's what you do with that money that really matters. How will you ensure that you wring every nickel out of your Social Security benefits? Could you pay fewer taxes in retirement? And how and when will you withdraw money from your IRA or 401k? Welcome to Secured Retirement Radio with Joe Lucy of Secured Retirement Financial. Joe's a certified financial planner, fiduciary, and a contributor to the Wall Street Journal, and has nearly 25 years of helping people just like you. This is where you can count on straightforward and objective advice on how to make your money go further in retirement. And now, here's your host, Joe Lucy.
So welcome to Secured Retirement Radio. I'm Joe Lucy, certified financial planner. I've got Dylan Malberg. We've got Nate Zeller, all broadcasting this morning from our Secured Retirement office here in St. Louis Park. Quick question. How much money do you think you're going to need to have saved in order to retire successfully? You think that number's $500,000? We're talking $1 million? Do you need $5 million? Come up with a number for yourself that's going to allow you to retire securely. Now, many people have come up with this magic number that they're trying to achieve, the net worth statement balance that they need to be able to retire comfortably, and rarely is there really a rhyme or reason behind that number. Now, saving and investing for retirement is obviously critical, but achieving some randomized savings goal doesn't necessarily ensure that you're going to have that successful and secure retirement. Now, I can show you a huge list of people, from celebrities to, just regular old Joes, that have saved $1 million and ended up going broke in their retirement years. I can show you a long list of people that have saved more modest amounts of money, and boy, they've had more than they ever really needed. So how much, or how do you know how much you need to have saved to have that retirement that you're looking forward to? You don't really know a magic number until you fall behind in savings, and all of a sudden, blowing out 85 candles on your birthday just may not be that much fun. We've got things like taxes, Social Security, health care, investment risk. How do we generate income from all this? So coming up in today's program, we're going to, somewhat sobering message about this myth that we often see here around a magic number, and what it really is going to take for you to have the retirement you're looking forward to. Good morning, gentlemen.
Nate, Joe, good morning.
Good morning.
So we see it all the time with families coming in our office, and if you're listening to the show this morning on Secure Retirement Radio, you have this goal the savings goal, this number you've been saving for probably decades to reach, and you probably got there. The markets have cooperated, and you've amassed a sum of money that maybe you thought you'd never even get to that goal, but now you're there. Now you're going to retire, and the reality is you need to have a strategy on how to turn that sum of money that you've massed and saved for into replacing those paychecks. And if you don't have a strategy around doing that, you're at a real risk of running out of money in retirement.
Well, Dylan, I oftentimes talk about 3 stages of aging, right? We got our go-go years. Now, those are the years when we are accumulating money for retirement. It's also probably early in retirement where you get to enjoy the fruits of all the hard-earned or the sacrifices and saving. We got our slower go years, which, those are those years that maybe jumping on Delta flight to Florida for a couple weeks doesn't seem quite as much fun. It's a little bit more challenging, but you get there and you still have a great time. And then we might have our no-go years. Now, it's during these go-go years that we can break this into that period of time where really, the goal here is to accumulate wealth. When I'm in my 30s or 40s, it's about how do I set aside a certain amount of the paycheck? I put it into this account. Hopefully you've got an employer that's giving you a little match. And many of us have accumulated a fair amount of money in here, far more than we ever really thought we'd ever get to in some cases when that first nickel went in. The real question, and part of the challenge that we're going to be talking about here today, is how do I take this money back? How do I make it tax efficient? How do I make sure it's going to last me a lifetime? It's a different stage than the accumulation stage, where it's really just about wealth accumulation. Oftentimes, you get to a point, and maybe it's in that golden decade as you're getting ready to retire, that you realize maybe my number one priority in retirement isn't about the wealth accumulation anymore. It's about how do I take this money back? How do I spend tax efficiently? How do I make it tax efficient? Now, growing wealth is obviously still a goal, but never at the sacrifice of those first two areas. And really the problem that we're talking about here this morning about this myth behind magic numbers is just getting to that point doesn't necessarily mean that you've got everything in place to make sure that the income and the tax reduction strategies are in place.
No, and you talk about putting together the income plan, and a lot of families will say, well, ladder some CDs. We got the savings account. Well, if you've been to the bank in the last 18 months, you've seen record low interest rates near zero, and you start seeing some of these numbers coming out on inflation. And Nate, I'll let you hit on this. Your money's losing money guaranteed sitting in the bank with where interest rates are at and where inflation's going.
Yeah, certainly, Dylan. We looked last week when there were the data releases on inflation. Inflation's running hotter than 6%, and I would argue that for a lot of individuals, their individual inflation rate's even higher than what the government reports. So if you're sitting on a savings in the bank earning close to zero, you're losing that 6%. The other thing that we see too is a lot of people project out inflation over longer terms, and they use a 2 or 3% number, but that's half of what the true inflation number is today. And people are really getting kind of painted in the corner. And as a retiree, you don't have a way of making up that income. As Joe was talking earlier, you save for so many decades, and then once you hit that retirement age, that's kind of the end. So you have to be wise in your income plan.
Well, and we are not suggesting here not to have anything in savings, because obviously there's certain monies that we need protected. There's money that is for emergency needs, and I think most of us are aware that the common benchmark here is somewhere between 3 and 6 months, just in case. Money that has to be sitting aside and liquid and accessible, and you should be able to go up to the bank this afternoon and take some of this money out if you need to. So there's that emergency funds. There's also, in some cases, where we see families with what I call teddy bear money. Teddy bear money just means that you've got more than this 6 months in savings, but man, you just sleep better at night knowing that there's a certain amount of money that's there. The problem is, if I've got teddy bear money and I'm not earning more than 0% and inflation keeps ramping up here at 6, well, congratulations, you've just lost 5 or 6% of buying power. So part of the challenge is, if we don't want to put this money at risk in the market or put it into something that can go up and down, think real estate, commodities, bond, gold, something like that. How do I get that better return so I can keep up with inflation? And of course, there's money that you need for an expense. If you're going to be buying that condo in Florida, well, let's not go flipping that into some new IPO coming out. That money needs to be also safe and secure. But the challenge is to make sure that we have that money available as we need it and that it's protected. Now, anyone that's retired or nearing retirement finds themselves in this quandary. It's between a rock and a hard place with generating income in today's environment. What the House here passed the other day is not going to make this any simpler. We think that inflation is here to stay. And with interest rates near zero, bond yields, they aren't doing any better. You have to start considering the impact that this inflation is going to have on you and the reality that you're really safely losing money in some cases. Now, if you invest your money all in the stock market, well, that comes with an additional risk, doesn't it? So what's the real answer? Well, we've put together, just for today's listeners, something that I want to make sure everybody takes advantage of. I want you to learn how you can turn your retirement savings and investments into an income workhorse with what we call the Secured Retirement Income Analysis. Now, the analysis, it's free and it's personalized just for you. We're going to share with you the fastest and safest ways that you can actually increase income that most people are overlooking. We're going to show you the key to protecting the principal from at least a portion of it from the growing risks of Wall Street, and how you can get even more income from your Social Security benefits just with some smart and savvy planning. Remember, the analysis is free. There's no obligation, and we're only going to be offering that this morning here on Secure Retirement Radio. So if you'd like to schedule your free customized analysis, call us right now, 952-777-8838. If you're the kind of person that needs to make your money work for you, and you can't afford to lose a dime, well, this is right up your alley. So the number is 952-777-8838, 952-777-8838.
When we come back, a critical retirement question that most people do not know the answer to.
That's Dylan Malberg. I got Nate Zeller with me. I'm Joe Lucy. More Secure Retirement Radio in a few moments.
He's a certified financial planner, fiduciary, and a contributor to the Wall Street Journal. And he's no ordinary Joe. You're listening to Joe Lucy on Secured Retirement Radio. He's a certified financial planner, fiduciary, and a contributor to the Wall Street Journal. You may not realize this, but he's kind of a big deal. Welcome back to Secured Retirement Radio with your host, Joe Lucy.
Now, if I asked you how much money you have in your retirement, how much have you set aside? Well, you probably can rattle that number off fairly quickly. And if not right on the top of your head, give me a couple minutes and a napkin and a pen, and I can probably come up with the answer and be pretty darn close. But if I asked you how much you were going to pay in taxes in your retirement on that money, well, most of us don't even have a clue. And if you don't know that number, the net number, well, then you really don't know how much money you have that's available for you in retirement, do you? Welcome back to Secured Retirement Radio. I'm Joe Lucy, certified financial planner. I got Nate Zeller. He's a CFP. He's a CFA. He's got a whole lot of initials. I got Dylan Malberg. We're all joining you here this morning and broadcasting from our Secure Retirement Radio studio right here in St. Louis Park. And today what we're doing is we're talking about a myth. It's a myth behind what is sometimes referred to as that magic number. It's the number that it takes for you, the number that it really is going to take for you to successfully retire. So coming up in this segment, why taxes? Taxes could be your biggest expense in retirement, and what you can do now to reduce, maybe even eliminate taxes in retirement so you have more security in your planning.
Well, we spent the first segment this morning on Secure Retirement Radio talking about the importance of having a income plan, and maybe just as important as that is how do we make sure that that income plan is going to not only last you a lifetime, but you're going to be able to take back that income and make it as tax efficient as possible to, again, lower, like Joe, you just talked about, what very well could be your largest expense in retirement.
Dylan, you mentioned taxes, and there's a lot of focus on taxes right now. With Joe had mentioned the bill passing the House this week. It's the large spending bill, so there's a lot of talk of tax increases. They've been happening since Biden took office. No matter when you see these changes, this tax strategy is critical to building a successful retirement. Well,
Kiplinger's had a recent article that I was reading, and it actually came out the day before Halloween. And the title was, "Don't Assume That You're Going to Pay Less in Taxes in Your Retirement." It goes on to talk about how today's retirees could end up paying far more in taxes than the previous generations. And this means that all of us are going to get stung with additional taxes. Now, I know, and you've heard this, that these tax changes aren't going to impact you. They're only going to impact them rich folk. But when we start looking at all the additional areas that we could end up paying more for. I mean, forget the inflation piece here. Let's talk about just on the 1040 or the number additional expenses you have because of the 1040 numbers. We're talking about additional Medicare premiums. How about taxes on money that could be tax-free in Social Security? It really starts to ramp up for everybody. And that's why, when we're sitting down with families and we're designing a retirement strategy, the plan for them so that they can take their money back and make sure it's going to last a lifetime, having that discussion and not getting into the taxes and those things, the strategies that we need to be doing proactively to put ourselves in the best position, well, it really means you might just have an investment strategy, but not a real plan for your retirement.
No, and you talk about taxes and, ultimately there's that mindset that while you're working, you're making all this money, you're going to retire and you're going to have this income drop and you're going to be in a lower tax bracket. So why would we pay taxes ahead of time? And the reality is when you start adding in income sources, whether it's retirement account withdrawals, Social Security, maybe you're one of the lucky ones and you have that nice pension left, most retirees are going to find themselves in the same or even a higher tax bracket when they're retired. And we look at where tax rates are at right now, over 40-year lows. We really have to start looking at, does it make sense to start proactively paying some tax today at lower rates than what could be in the future? And you look at, with coronavirus and all the spending, and we can go down all the bills if we have to, but money isn't free and it's got to be paid for somehow.
Well, and, the other thing is, Dylan, is we are in the midst right here of enjoying a 40-year tax low. The taxes are lower today than they've been for most of us. But then the laws were passed. They passed a provision that said that starting January 1st of 2026, to get the law through Congress when under Donald Trump's presidency, they had to allow tax rates to go back to where they were in 2017. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that if you're enjoying a 12% tax bracket right now, that's probably a gross income a little north of $100,000. You are in a 12% bracket. That means that reverts back without any action by Congress whatsoever to a 15% bracket. Now, that to me is a 25% increase. Now, what if you are in the 22 bracket? If you're in a 22% tax bracket, income probably just shy of about 200, you are now going to see ourselves going to 25. A 28% bracket means 32. Now, this is all for married folks. We need to start also looking at the kiddos and widows taxes, the taxes that our children will pay, the taxes that our surviving spouse may have to pay. A surviving spouse, if we aren't looking at this and planning for it, in many cases with the same income, which has to be taken with pensions and inheriting IRA accounts and required distributions, in many cases finds themselves jumping up to a higher bracket than they were enjoying when they were married. If we aren't, there's two things that are certain, right? We got death and taxes. If we're not looking at taxes as part of our income plan, then we might have an incomplete retirement plan if they're only looking at which is the best mutual fund for me right now.
Well, and you talk about having not just the income plan, but just your overall plan, and how do we put everything together to make sure that you're going to have an income plan that's going to last you a lifetime. It's going to adjust for inflation. And there's nothing that's going to happen in Wall Street and the stock market that's going to impact your retirement. And also, let's make sure we're looking at the tax piece of it and taking advantage of these over 40-year lows in tax rates to save us on what very well, in our opinion, will be your biggest expense in retirement, and that's around your tax return.
If you've ever joined us here on Secure Retirement Radio, you've heard me say this before, but growing our retirement savings, well, it's far more challenging today than it ever has been. You may not realize it, but probably the fastest and safest way that you can grow your retirement nest egg today, well, it's by focusing on taxes and reducing the impact that they will have on your retirement savings. After all, less money you pay to Uncle Sam, the less money that goes to the IRS, the more money you get to spend on you and your family and enjoying your retirement. That's why we put together the Secured Retirement Tax Savings Analysis. Now, I want to share with you so you can learn exactly how you can reduce, sometimes even eliminate taxes in retirement with a free Secured Retirement Tax Analysis. Let me explain how it works. We gather some basic information from you. We bring it to the lab. We combine everything together, and then we determine some tax saving strategies that are appropriate and best suited for your specific needs. Now, we'll then sit down with you, and we're going to share the strategies with you. Some of these are very simple. Some of them may take a little bit more thought, but with some of these, you can see exactly how much money you can save. They aren't just some obvious deductions about how to save a couple bucks on next year's tax return. We're talking about life savings, tens of thousands, oftentimes six figures in retirement savings, just by bringing in some simple defensive tax planning strategies. If you feel that you're incomplete in this area, then you can't go the rest of the weekend without calling to get your secured retirement tax savings analysis. The number to call is 952-777-8838. Also keep in mind, some of these strategies are probably going to be expiring soon, maybe even before 2026, so you don't want to wait. Call, schedule your secured retirement tax saving analysis this morning by dialing 952-777-8838. That's 952-777-8838.
Are you taking too much investment risk than you know, or maybe even need to at this stage of the game? When we come back, the latest strategies that can help you reduce your investment risk into retirement.
He's Dylan Malberg. I got Nate Zeller, our investment strategist, with us. I'm Joe Lucy. More Secure Retirement Radio in just a few moments.
He's a certified financial planner, fiduciary, and a contributor to the Wall Street Journal. And he's no ordinary Joe. You're listening to Joe Lucy on Secured Retirement Radio.
Twin Cities News Talk.
He's a certified financial planner, fiduciary, and a contributor to the Wall Street Journal. You may not realize this, but he's kind of a big deal. Welcome back to Secured Retirement Radio with your host, Joe Lucy.
So, if the stock market took a dump, if the portfolio you have dropped by 30 or 40%, and maybe it's no fault of your own, it's just maybe something that they do out there in Washington, or who knows what it could be, would you still be okay? I mean, if you lost 30% of the portfolio today, are you still in good shape? A lot of times we have a magic number in our head, but that number might assume that the markets will continue to go on and on forever. But what if that wasn't the case? Welcome back to Secure Retirement Radio. I'm Joe Lucy, certified financial planner. I got our investment strategist, Nate Zeller, here. We got Dylan Malberg, one of our advisors here. And today we are talking about this myth. It's a myth that we often see around a fictitious or a magic number. It's magic. And what it really takes to retire in today's environment. Now, coming up in this segment, the latest strategies that can help you reduce investment risk, and why a well thought out and proper asset allocation is probably more complicated than just a mix of 60-40 stocks to bonds and mutual funds, and how we can make sure that we're minimizing the amount of risk that we're currently taking within our investment portfolios.
Oh, and we talked about, making sure we have a plan around taxes and how we have this income plan, and let's make sure it's going to be as tax efficient as possible. We also talked about this magic number. We talked about it right away in the beginning of the show this morning, is how maybe you have this goal that you've been saving for decades to get to this magic number, and to get to that magic number, the stock market has rewarded you, and you've been probably fairly aggressive in your accounts. And as you go into retirement, we have to start addressing really where is your level of risk, and also where should it be as you transition into retirement.
And Dylan, if you look at where the market is now, it's really it's been on an incredible run. Notwithstanding the coronavirus dip last year, that was a very quick thing to recover, but a lot of people are sitting on nest eggs. A lot of people retiring or pre-retiring, huge nest eggs, thanks to what the stock market's done the last few years. The problem is when you hit that retirement, I think people become complacent. They're expecting the market to continue on like it has, but if they hit retirement and the market does take a big dump, it'll have a significant impact on their savings, which then in turn could have a significant impact on their lifestyle. Look at where the market is today, and it doesn't necessarily have to take a downturn but even if it slows down significantly, that could have an impact as well.
Sometimes when we're talking about market corrections, especially when we keep on seeing the market do what it's been doing here for the last several years, we've had some, dips, but I sometimes feel like Chicken Little, the guy that's running around saying the sky is falling, and everybody's laughing at him as they're trying to bury their head. But I don't know if we're alone here, because CNBC recently did a poll of 400 chief investment officers, equity strategists, portfolio managers, and their CNBC contributors. And they asked their opinion on the stock markets for the remainder of 2021 and early into next year. Now, more than 3/4, 75% of these respondents said now is a time to be very conservative in the stock market when they were asked about how much risk you should be willing to accept for yourselves and your family and your retirement. The problem is that the closer we get to retirement, if you are early in retirement, it's harder to recover from a loss in your portfolios. In the stock market at records highs, it's not a matter of if a correction may happen someday. It's just really a matter of when. And understanding your appetite and other factors like risk capacity, how much could you lose and still be able to retire to the goals and dreams that you have? Risk required, how do I keep up with inflation? And again, the risk tolerance, how much emotionally are you comfortable with? Well, if you aren't paying attention to that, then we can run into a situation where we take on a risk that hasn't had to be talked about too much, or we haven't experienced. But this is what we call risk, or sequence of returns risk, right, Tom?
Yeah, and that sequence of returns risk is really just a downturn in the market early on in retirement, where it's forcing you to sell off positions and lock in losses. And when you're in a position where you have to do that because if the market's down, the liabilities that you have, whether it's the cabin, the condo in Florida, or the house in Minneapolis or wherever you're at, those don't go away. And when you start locking in losses early in retirement, that's money that it's gone, and that money can never recover. And that's when your nest egg that you saved up for disappears a lot quicker than you anticipated.
Now, we're often asked, how do we help protect families, and how do we make sure that they can survive a sequence of return, a drop in the market, and early retirement? And it really comes down to making sure we look at the kind of planning that's been completed in your as you get ready for retirement, and the incomplete planning. So areas that we want to make sure are completed. Do we have a strategy around taxes in a rising tax environment? Are we slowly painting ourselves in a corner, or are we the frog in a pot that has now been turned on and could be boiling, and it might be too late to jump out if we start to see a major increase in taxation in the future? We need to make sure we have a plan in place for making our money last. It's how do I take the money back? How do I stress that and make sure that if I and my spouse live to age 120, that we're both in great shape? And on the other extreme, how do I make sure that should there be a loss of one of us early in retirement, that the surviving spouse is going to be in great shape? And then we need to start looking at the portfolios, and how do I make sure that we're allocated in such a way that we aren't taking as much risk as we were taking in our 30s and 40s. I was sitting down with Steve and Barb, were their names, but they were in our office the other day, and as we started to make some suggestions about their portfolios, the comments that came back were, hey, Joe, we are not risk adverse. We enjoy risk. We, in fact, have accumulated a fair amount of money in our retirement savings because we've been aggressive, and we've seen downturns, and we know what that's like, and we aren't selling off when the market goes down. And I related with them an analogy about a trip that I was taking with my family a couple summers ago. You see, we went out to the Black Hills, and we were driving around, and there's a sign there that said next gas stop 70 miles. Now I looked down at the tank, and I wasn't full, but I wasn't empty or near empty either. I had a good 3/4 of the tank, maybe a little less than that. But I said, we can make it. In fact, my little gauge said I had another 90 miles, so I didn't want to stop. We were in a hurry to get someplace, and I just kept on going on. Now, 10, 15 miles down the road, it said, the next gas stop isn't for another 65 miles. I looked at the gauge. I'm still okay. And we're going along, and all of a sudden my wife, Patty, says, Joe, are you sure we shouldn't have stopped back there? I said, we're okay. I've got 60-some miles, and it says we only have to go another 40. And then another one that said another 30. And I'm looking back, and, now me and my wife are having this discussion about how much gas is in the tank and how I should have pulled over back half an hour earlier. And then we get to that gas station, and I'm rolling in. And, I got another 5 gallons, I'm sure, even though the little thing had gone off and told me I was low on fuel. And as I was pumping the tank, and Patty and my son were inside grabbing some drinks and such, the attendant there said, wasn't that one of the most beautiful drives you've ever been on? And I realized that the entire group of us, every one of us, has spent the last hour on one of the most beautiful drives in the country, focusing on what's left in the gas tank. And we missed the view. Well, think about your own retirement. Are you going to be focusing on what's left in the tank? Is it time to maybe start making sure that we don't run out of fuel? And even if you don't, isn't the whole idea of this to enjoy the ride? Now, if you're in retirement, if you're near retirement, you oftentimes find yourself stuck in a rock and a hard place. It's about how do you generate income in a low interest rate environment. We got bond yields at lows, probably going higher. It means that our fixed income, it may not be the best place for us. And on top of this, we've got an economy that's cooking away at 6+% inflation. Now, if it all goes in the market to try to combat this, well, then we can find ourselves just focusing on, what's left in the tank. And are we going to get there? Especially if we see a correction early in retirement. Now, what's the answer? Well, we put together what we call a secure retirement income analysis. I want to share with you in this free, customized analysis the fastest and safest way that you can increase your income and get more of it so we don't have to always rely on what's going on in our 401k balance. I want to share with you the key to protecting the principal and still getting good rates of return, and how do we get the most out of our Social Security benefits. Now, remember, the analysis itself is free. There's no obligation. There's no cost. In fact, you can bring it back to where you're currently working and say, here are some things that they think are incomplete in my planning. So you can get these completed so you aren't focusing, so you can focus on what's really important. To get the income analysis, call right now, 952-777-8838. 952-777-8838. If you're the kind of person that needs to make your money work as hard as it should for you, and you want to enjoy the ride, then give us a call. Get your income analysis, 952-777-8838.
When we come back, why filing for Social Security could trigger higher taxes and even double your Medicare premiums.
At Dylan Marburg, I got our investment strategist, Nate Zeller. I'm Joe Lucy. More Secure Retirement Radio in a few minutes.
What I want, you got, it might be hard to handle, like a flame that burns a candle.
He's a certified financial planner, fiduciary, and a contributor to the Wall Street Journal. And he's no ordinary Joe. You're listening to Joe Lucy on Secured Retirement Radio. He's a certified financial planner, fiduciary, and a contributor to the Wall Street Journal. You may not realize this, but he's kind of a big deal. Welcome back to Secured Retirement Radio with your host, Joe Lucy.
Now, did you know that 96% of hardworking Americans are expected to lose, on average, $111,000 of what could have been theirs out of their Social Security benefits in retirement? And that's because of improper timing on when they elect their benefits. So welcome back to Secure Retirement Radio. I'm Joe Lucy, certified financial planner. Got Nate Zeller, got Dylan Malberg. We're broadcasting this morning out of our St. Louis Park studio. Now, coming up in this final segment, as we talk about the myth around a magic number, how much you need to have saved in retirement, we can't have that discussion without talking about how you're going to elect your Social Security. See, Social Security has got to be the foundation of your income. 90% of us as Americans have it. And by making a $111,000 mistake because we didn't complete planning in this area, well, that could mean a whole lot less for you and your family in retirement. And so let's talk a little bit about Social Security, guys.
So far today, we've talked about having a strategy to generate income in retirement, reducing or eliminating taxes in your retirement accounts, and then minimizing the level of risk in your portfolio. So now let's talk about optimizing your Social Security benefits.
Well, I guess before we get to optimizing, a lot of people don't realize this, but there's a right and a wrong way to go about filing for Social Security. And we first look at it, and there's a lot of families that look at it just face value. They go and there's a bunch of free calculators out there. They look at what's called a net present value calculator. What's the biggest number I can get out of Social Security? That's out there. You can get that from, if you just Google it, you can find it. But until we look at your specific situation and we acknowledge that Social Security is a more tax efficient source of income, and it's not all about how do we just get the most Social Security, actual gross numbers in the checkbook, but how do we take Social Security and make sure that already tax efficient income stream is going to be as tax efficient as possible?
Here, I'm going to save some of the engineers out there that like to put everything on spreadsheets, or maybe you're like Nate here, and I tell you, a guy that knows how to put some pivot tables together in a balance sheet, it amazes me what he can do. And some of you are listening to us here this morning, and that's what you are. You're good at that. And what you've done is you've calculated Social Security, and you said, my break even is somewhere about age 78 or 80. If I live past that, well, then I should wait. And if I don't know if I'm going to make it there, take it early. Now, keep in mind, Social Security is for two, right? The larger check, if you're married, will pass on to your spouse. So inadvertently chopping some of that income and losing some of that because of improper timing can really be devastating to a surviving spouse. And if you're that engineer or the person that likes the spreadsheets and you've done your math, a lot of times you'll come to this conclusion that maybe just taking it at full retirement age works, or you should wait till 70. Go to any online calculator. I'll tell you, both of you should just wait till 70 to take your benefit. If you're not bringing in the other component, one of these four areas you need to be looking at, and it's a component around the taxation and the savings around Social Security, which is worst case scenario, 15% tax free for everyone listening to us today. Also understanding that Social Security by itself is 100% tax free for everybody joining us today, as long as we don't have other taxable income hitting the tax returns. You see, sometimes when we talk about how to reduce our taxes and make the right Social Security decisions, we need to start thinking about, should I take my IRA balances first and then wait, or do I take Social Security, knowing I might take more out of the IRA balances down the road? You got to bring the math around taxes into this equation and understand that taxes are very likely going higher. And if we can eliminate some of the taxable income, doesn't mean you have to live on less. It's just how do we reposition things in a way that we can get the most out of this. And Dylan, you brought up these net present values and, how we take these future dollars and discount them to today's numbers and everything else. The reality is there's a maximum way to take your benefit. Save you a lot of time. Just both of you wait till 70 in most cases. And then there's an optimal way. And the optimal way for you and your family can't be decided by a simple free calculator. It has to only happen when you are looking at all of the different nuances around Social Security and making sure that you're aware of what you don't know. We talk a lot about the myth of this magic number, and I've talked a little bit this morning about completed planning and incomplete planning. And the one area that a lot of times we see is that while many of us have done a fantastic job accumulating money in our retirement accounts, we may have incomplete planning or be making one of those mistakes. As Forbes magazine tells us, only 4% of families are optimizing their Social Security income. And the average, 96% of us are losing somewhere near $111,000. And it's part of our mission here at Secure Retirement Radio to make sure that you get this area of planning complete.
Well, again, you talk about this myth and this magic number, and ultimately it's not about a magic number. It's about making sure you have a plan to have a plan for income that's going to last you and your spouse. If you're married a lifetime, it's going to adjust for inflation. You're going to take it back. You're going to take it back tax efficiently. And then, if we can grow the wealth after that, that's something we're going to do. But we really have to focus around the income and the taxes. Where we're talking about right now, the income plan, Social Security, and optimization of that income source is going to be the foundation of that income plan and retirement.
Oh, and we talk a lot about mailbox income. It's not just about the wealth, the balance sheet. As you transition to retirement, if you're already retired, you know this. It's about how do I take it back? How do I make it last a lifetime? And a lot of times it's around mailbox income, money that you can receive without worrying about the stock market, not worrying about the 401k balance. And Social Security and deciding when to claim your Social Security is probably the most important for anybody that's in the golden decade between the age of 60 and 70. As we can make these elections, the difference between a great decision and a poor decision can mean hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's why we put together, just for today's listeners, the Secured Retirement Social Security Benefit Analysis. And in the analysis, it's free and it's customized to your situation. We're going to talk about the optimal time, the date and month that you should be taking your benefits to get the most income. We're going to show you how you can reduce or eliminate paying taxes on up to 85% of these benefits. In some cases, get 100% tax-free. How you can avoid doubling Medicare premiums. It's those hidden taxes we got to be careful of. Plus, if you're eligible for other benefits that we're aware of, we're going to make sure you know that when you walk out the door. If you have not filed for Social Security and you have resources available for your retirement so you don't have to spend it, then give us a call this morning and get a free customized Social Security analysis at 952-777-8838. That's 952-777-8838. I urge you, don't take your Social Security decision lightly. Get a free Secured Retirement Analysis this morning, 952-777-8838. That's all we have time for on this week's show. Back next Saturday with more Secure Retirement Radio. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
He's a certified financial planner, fiduciary, and a contributor to the Wall Street Journal. And he's no ordinary Joe. You're listening to Joe Lucy on Secured Retirement Radio.